Sunningdale case study. So, just some background. The Sunningdale Agreement was an attempt to establish a power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland to solve all of the conflict that was taking place in the North at the time. And it all started in September 1972 when William Whitelaw, who was the Secretary of State of Northern Ireland, invited political parties to talk about the ongoing situation. He invited the Unionist Party, the Alliance Party, SDLP, and Labour. However, SDLP refused to attend out of protest because of internment without trial that was continuing in the state, but they met privately with Whitelaw. And around the same time, on the 8th of March 1973, there actually was a referendum on the border, but 97.8% of people voted in favour of remaining in the UK. However, nationalists refused to vote out of protests. Then, on the 20th of March 1973, the White Paper was published, and it was called Northern Ireland Constitutional Proposals. It recommended that a new government called the Executive should be established, and a new Prime Minister called the Chief Executive should be head of the government, with a new Parliament called the Assembly. It should have proportional representation, and 12 MPs would remain to sit in Westminster, and a Council of Ireland would exist between the North and South. And until this was all set up, Westminster would remain in control until a stable government could be established. At first, the Unionists were totally against this, as it was seen as favourable towards the Nationalists, because the whole point of this was to stop IRA violence. So then an assembly needs to be formed. Elections were held on the 28th of June 1973. The Ulster Unionist Party had a pro-assembly and anti-assembly candidates. And in November, it was announced that the Ulster Unionist Party, SDLP, and Alliance Party had all agreed to form an executive. And Brian Faulkner was going to be the chief executive, who we can see here. And Jerry Fitt of the SDLP was going to be deputy chief executive. The Ulster Unionist Party had 6 members, the SDLP had 4 members, and the Alliance Party had one member, who were all going to make up the executive. John Hume, who was a famous nationalist at the time, wanted the Council of Ireland to consist of members of both governments and politicians from both the Assembly and the Dáil, and Whitehall agreed with him, or Whitelaw, sorry. Then, on the 21st of November 1973, it became official. Whitelaw announced an agreement in principle had been reached, and he appeared on the steps of Stormont with a tear in his eye. It was a monumental moment. It was the first time that Unionists and Nationalists were starting to work together. However, Unionists seen it as a betrayal, and Republicans seen it as selling out for the British. And around the same time, Whitelaw is replaced. Then it was time for an official agreement. So all of the leaders met in Sunningdale between the 6th of November to the 9th of December. Faulkner had asked Cosgrave, who was the then Taoiseach of Ireland, to repeal Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution, which basically claimed Northern Ireland. However, Cosgrave rejected this because he knew the referendum would never work. But then an agreement came about, and the agreement consisted of the following. A Council of Ireland would consist of 2 parts, a Council of Ministers with 7 from the South and 7 from the North, a Consultative Assembly with 30 from the Dáil and 30 from the Assembly, and the Irish government would accept no change in the status of Northern Ireland unless the majority wanted it, and the British government would accept the same. And Unionists had a strong opposition against the Council of Ireland because, after all, the south of Ireland still now had a little bit of power in the north, which they did not like at all. So the new council now took power on January 1st, 1974, and there was an immediate strong resistance. The Ulster Unionist Council on the 4th of January passed a motion rejecting it, and Faulkner resigns from the Ulster Unionist Council. However, he was still chief executive. The DUP protested by obstructing the seats, so they took the seats that the executive were due to having, and they had to be removed by the RUC. And then the SDLP councillor Hugh Logg made the statement that the vehicle that would trundle Unionists into a united Ireland, and obviously he's referring to the Sunningdale Agreement here, which was highly controversial at the time. And Faulkner was abused on the streets, and even as Pym put it, Faulkner was closer to his SDLP colleagues than his fellow Unionist ministers. Then it was time for the British general election in 1974. So as we can remember, Northern Ireland was allowed 12 seats in Westminster, and out of those 12 seats, the United Ulster Unionist Council took 11, and I believe the 12th was taken by Jerry Fitt of the SDLP. And pro-assembly unionists won no seats. So this just showed how unpopular the pro-assembly unionists really were. And Harold Winston was now the new Prime Minister, and he appointed Merrill Rees as the new Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. So, the IRA response. They feared the SDLP would take support from them, so they stepped up a campaign of violence. Then we have the unionist response. The Ulster Workers' Council was set up, and a strike was announced the 15th of May 1974. Power output was reduced by 60%, and roadblocks were set up to stop supplies from entering Northern Ireland. However, supplies still reached the Protestant areas because of special mitigation features put in. The British Army and RIC did nothing, and this was under the direction of Merrill Rees, because Merrill Rees was afraid to let the army step in because she was afraid of all hell breaking loose in Northern Ireland. Harold Wilson was then furious, and on live television he called them spongers and said, "Who do these people think they are?" So you can only imagine these unionists are already furious, and now they have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom on television calling them spongers. Then on the 17th of May, the Ulster Volunteer Force detonated bombs in Dublin and Monaghan, which killed 33 people. So now the South was being dragged into it as well. And after 2 weeks, Faulkner was forced to resign on May 28th, which collapses the executive. And the executive had taken 2 years to build, but it was destroyed in just 5 months. So that was it then. That was the end of Sunningdale. So unionists celebrated because they always viewed the executive as a threat, and this now demonstrated that there'd be no agreement without them, and it also demonstrated that they were not willing to accept anything less than majority. Obviously, nationalists were outraged. It was their first chance at equality, and they were shocked because of the manner in which it was just pulled away from them. And Southern Ireland was deeply disappointed because they believed this was the best chance of ending the troubles in the north. And then the reasons for failure. Well, first of all, the Unionists were not willing to accept anything less than majority. The second reason is the Council of Ireland. Unionists always hated the Council of Ireland because they did not want the South to have any say in the running of the Northern Ireland. And they also was highly suspicious of Cosgrave's refusal to take away Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution. And then, of course, Merrill Rees, she was unwilling to step in and shut down the Ulster Workers' Council strike, so she was unwilling to secure progress had already been made. And then, of course, with so many opposed, it was basically bound to collapse. However, despite its failure, it's still incredibly important. It was the first time that both Unionists and Nationalists shared power and established a framework for new future negotiations. And a lot of the Good Friday Agreement was based on Sunningdale. It also gave the rights of the Republic to be involved, and as Seamus Malone described it, the Good Friday Agreement was Sunningdale for slow learners. And then the British realised that they needed Northern Ireland stakeholders to solve the problems themselves. They realised that they could no longer solve this, and they had to get the people of Northern Ireland to solve this themselves. And then there was a constitutional convention in 1975, however, very little progress was made.